Are we able to promote Howard Wong, the Mandarin interpreter, to co-host? He's having issues with his camera.
What's going on?
I'm sorry, interpreter, Howard Wong. Are we able to add him in as a co-host?
He needs to be added as a co-host.
He's a co-host. He's a co-host.
Yes.
Yeah.
Denny Tong.
The Howard Wong.
Howard Wong.
Okay. Denny Tong. Denny Tong is a co-host now. Thank you.
Howard Wong. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So, all right, are we recording?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming to CEC 15th March business meeting. Today is Tuesday, March 11th, 2025. I'm President Antonia Ferraro Martinelli, and I'll be calling this meeting to order at 6:35. We are coming to you from 131 Livingston Street. I'll ask that everyone here please sign the attendance sheet in the back of the room if you are here in person. And if you are on the Zoom, I will put a link in the chat for you to sign in. Thank you so much. Let's see how many people we have on this call right now. There's about 17 people on the call. And some people in the room. So I'm going to hand it over to the interpreters to please introduce yourself in your language. Let's start off with Spanish.
Good evening. The following message will be in Spanish. Si desea escuchar el audio en español, el número para la línea en español es 347-966-4114 y la clave de ingresar 999-778-375, símbolo numeral. Una vez más, ese número es 347-966-4114 y la clave de ingresar 999-778-375, símbolo numeral. La información también lo puede encontrar en la charla. Gracias. This concludes the Spanish intro.
Okay, and Mandarin?
各位家长晚上好。如果需要国语翻译的，请打专线电话347-966-4114，密码呢是672-677-794。输入密码后，请再按一个井字。进入后呢，请大家按井星6。如果有任何登录问题，请在聊天室留言。Thank you.
And Bangla?
Thank you. The following message will be for Bangla participants. আপনার যারা আজকে অনুষ্ঠানটি বাংলায় শুনতে চান তাদের ফোন থেকে ডায়াল করবেন 347-966-4114 এবং কনফারেন্স আইডি চাইলে দিবেন 217-785-58#। আবার বলছি ফোন নাম্বারটি হবে 347-966-4114 এবং কনফারেন্স আইডি বা পিন হবে 217-785-58#। আপনাদের কোনো প্রশ্ন থাকলে এখানে লিখতে পারেন অথবা আমাদের মাধ্যমে প্রশ্নটি করতে পারেন, অন্যথায় মিউট করে রাখবেন। ধন্যবাদ। থ্যাংক ইউ। বাংলা ইজ কমপ্লিট।
Thank you so much. My secretary is not here right now. Jonathan, do you have would you be able to call the roll?
Sure.
We did Mandarin.
Okay. So let's do a quick roll call. Antonia Ferraro Martinelli. Leslie King.
Present.
Vanessa Gonzalez-Uyoka. Nancy Cruz will be here shortly, I believe. Katina Rogers.
Present.
Jonathan Davis, present. Hans Arietta.
I haven't heard from him.
Donald Chumney will be here momentarily. Nancy Randall.
Not certain.
Okay. Skip over Stanley.
Stanley Vidal resigned effective today. So we have lost our District 75 member. We'll talk about that more later.
And then Kwame Egerton.
We'll see what happens. I'm gonna leave those blank
Yep.
for now and we'll fill them in later. We do not have no quorum yet at 6:39. But we'll see. Maybe we will get quorum in a little bit. Leslie,
Yes.
you do not have, but I have it, if you would like to read the
Yes.
introduction there.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for coming to the District 15 Community Education Council tonight. We appreciate your time and are glad you could join us. For those of you who are new to CEC meetings, there are 32 CECs throughout the city, plus 4 citywide councils. Each CEC represents a community school district, and each is made up of 12 volunteer members, 10 of whom are elected by parents in the district. The remaining members are appointed by Brooklyn Borough President and 2 high school student members. CEC 15 is a state mandated public body responsible for ensuring that public school parents and the public have input in educational decisions that are made at the school district level. Our council reviews education policies and advocates for high quality education that benefit all of our District 15 public elementary and middle school students. CEC 15 serves 38 elementary and middle schools, 3 pre-K sites, and 1 high school under the oversight of our superintendent. CEC members serve in an advisory role on education matters that the district superintendent, the chancellor of the Department of Education, and to state and city elected officials. We approve district school zoning lines submitted by the Department of Education. We evaluate our school district superintendent. We review the district's educational programs, and we support school leadership teams. We also submit recommendations for School Construction Authority's annual capital plan. As of recent amendments to the law, CECs advise in the selection of parent coordinators. We actively seek input and feedback from the public and encourage you to visit our website, cecd15.org, and write to us about any issues you may want to address or learn about. Each school has a CEC liaison, and all of our names and contact info are available on our website.
Okay. So the public comment protocol. Tonight's business meeting is in person and will include a public comment period. We will take both remote and in-person comments to gather additional feedback from our families and school community members. You may leave your camera on, or for your own privacy, if you prefer, you may use audio only during the comment period and throughout the meeting. Rules of engagement. When you comment, please comment on the topic. Respect the privacy of others, and please do not include names of children or staff. Guests who make inappropriate comments will be removed from the meeting. During the public comment period, those attending virtually may raise their hand to comment or indicate in the chat that they would like to speak. Those called upon will be unmuted. If you are attending in person, you must sign the guest attendance sheet and indicate whether you would like to comment. Speakers will be called on one at a time and will be allowed 1 minute each for comment. We will hear as many speakers as the time allows. It is possible that not every comment and/or question will be given time, so the best way to get your question answered is always to write to the CEC at cec15@schools.nyc.gov. CEC members will also be given a comment period. Members will be called upon and are each permitted 1 2-minute comment and/or question. If members do not have a comment, they may cede their time to the chair.
Okay, all right, we have a new member here. You're welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
We still do not
tardiness.
have quorum yet, but
It's coming.
I think it's coming. I thought I saw Hans, but he went in the back.
Okay.
You're not in the room.
See Holmes?
I thought I saw him in the elevator.
Yeah.
Like before he came up.
He's not in the room.
Yes, so I think he's coming.
So I think what we have to do is, skip over the voting business for now, and we have to, hand it over to the presenters. The Coalition for Equitable Education Funding, we have Sarah Hart here. Why don't you come up here and have a seat? And, Shanice will put the slides up, and we'll just, we'll get going with that, while we're waiting.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Hart. I am the Senior Policy Analyst with Advocates for Children of New York. And I'm here on behalf of the Coalition for Equitable Education Funding, which AFC helps coordinate, basically. We are made up of about 120 organizations. We first came together about a year and a half ago as the Emergency Coalition to Save Education Programs. And we were initially advocating because the city was paying for a whole lot of important long-term education programs using one-time federal COVID-19 stimulus funds that were about to expire. And so we were advocating for the city to invest money to save all those programs. You go ahead and go to the next slide. So a lot of these programs are at risk of ending. There were also some that were funded with temporary one-year city funds that we wanted to save. And thanks to a lot of advocacy by parents, community members, students, council members, the city continued funding for a whole lot of those programs that were at risk of being rolled back or eliminated last year. City invested about 800 million last year to save those programs, and some of those were continued with one-year city funding again. So we're basically have the same problem we did last year, where that money's gonna expire this June, unless it's extended in the coming city budget. And then a bunch of other programs were continued, using, state education funding or foundation aid. So I'm gonna talk about both city and state budget, starting with the city. So you can go ahead, next slide, yes. So these are some of the programs that were saved last year, but continued through 1 year city dollars only, meaning they're once again at risk of being rolled back or eliminated as soon as July if the mayor and the council don't act to extend them in this year's budget. Next slide. So the mayor's preliminary budget extended funding for 2 of them for 1 more year. Summer programming, Summer Rising, and Learning to Work, which provides internships for high school students, particularly like at transfer school students who are at risk of dropping out or not graduating. So that's great. They're only funded for 1 more year, which means we're gonna be in the same position this time next year. The others were left out entirely. Next. So that means all of those programs remaining are once again at risk of significant cuts at the end of June. So I'll go through each of them briefly. The numbers there on the slide represent the amount that's at risk. Most of these programs, they have multiple sources of funding. So like 3K, there's $112 million that's at risk. The entire budget for 3K is obviously much larger than that, but 112 million, not a small chunk of change. Next slide. So these are the programs that were left out that are still at risk. 112 million for 3K, 1 year city funding, runs out at the end of June. Last year's city budget also included another 25 million for extended day 3K and pre-K seats and 5 million for community outreach, essentially to make sure families know about the program, know how to apply, so there aren't empty seats, seats going unfilled because parents don't know about them. Obviously, losing this funding would be bad, meaning lots of 3-year-olds don't get to go to 3K. It's also bad for parents, obviously working parents, it provides childcare. Lots of reasons why 3K is good, and we don't want to lose 112 million. Preschool special education classes, so city invested 55 million in 1 year funding last year to open new preschool special education classes. They're for quite a few years now, there has been a consistent ongoing shortage of preschool special education classes, so smaller classes, fewer students for students who have significant disabilities, who have autism, significant developmental delays. This funding added about 700 seats, which is great. Even with this funding, there's still currently, as of right now, about 450 preschoolers who have a legal right to a seat in a preschool special education class who do not have one, who are sitting at home. Providing preschool special education classes for kids who need them is not optional. Yeah, this is a persistent problem in the city. The 55 million, we were very excited about it, but not even enough, and now it's at risk of disappearing entirely. Community schools, I guess most of you know, community schools provide, partner with community-based organizations to provide students and their families with wraparound services. So things like after-school programs, health clinics, adult education classes, and community schools. There's about 400 of them. Most of them are funded with other funding sources that's not at risk, but there is 14 million that supports about 70 or so community schools that one-year city funding will run out at the end of June. Restorative justice practices allow schools to use alternatives to suspension, keeping students in the classroom, helping them build and repair relationships. 1 year funding represents the majority of the city's investment in restorative practices. The mental health continuum, 5 million, it helps, it's in about 50 high need schools in the Bronx and Brooklyn, and it's essentially a program to help students with significant mental health needs access expedited mental health care. It's a joint initiative by the Department of Education, Health and Hospitals, and the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. So there are already people who are working in schools with this initiative. There are students who are receiving services, but the funding all runs out at the end of June. That's the theme. Immigrant family communications and outreach, 4 million. This is an initiative that started a couple years ago to strengthen communication with immigrant families, many of whom wouldn't get the information they need. So this goes beyond just translation and interpretation services, and it's also really focused on families who have limited digital literacy, who don't have access to email or the DOE's website. It really focuses on other forms of outreach like phone calls, text messages, hard copy, paper notices, and it involves partnerships with very grassroots immigrant serving community-based organizations to basically get information out to families. Obviously, there's been a big increase in the number of immigrant families arriving in New York City over the past couple of years, not something we want to see disappear, and especially at a time when, given federal policies, a lot of immigrant families are particularly afraid to send their kids to school, to engage with the school system entirely. So we are actually, Advocates for Children is actually asking for an increase in funding for this initiative for this year. But at the bare minimum, they need to renew the 4 million. Student success centers, again, 3.3 million in the scheme of the whole city budget, not a lot of money, but it makes a big difference. This is a program that's in 30 or so high schools. We're basically trained youth leaders are helping their peers with the college admissions process. It's building a culture of college readiness for students who might not otherwise have that. And this is not a complete list. You can go to the next slide, of everything that's at risk. So some other big things that are also supported by 1 year city funds right now: arts programming, 41 million, some teacher recruitment initiatives, 10 million, high impact tutoring, which I believe is in about 100 or so schools, 4 million for that. It's K-2 literacy tutoring, and then middle school math. So there's a lot. Our recommendation as a coalition, as you can probably guess, include long-term funding for all of these programs in the final budget. So parents, students, teachers, community-based organizations involved in these programs need to know that they're going to be able to rely on them. that they're gonna continue next year and beyond. We also obviously want the city to make more investments, to support students with a focus on those who have the greatest needs. Next slide, the timeline. So the mayor released his preliminary budget in January. That was the one that left out funding for everything except learning to work and summer rising. On May 1st, that's the deadline for the mayor to release his executive budget. We're hoping he may include at least a few additional programs in that. We'll see. The mayor then negotiates the budget with the city council. The deadline is June 30th for them to agree on a final budget. So you can go to the next slide. This Thursday, day after tomorrow, is actually the city council is holding a hearing on the preliminary budget. And we are actually going to be holding a rally on the steps of City Hall at 9 a.m. that we would love for people to join. Advocating for all of these programs to be continued, for the money to be included. There's also testimony, for many of you know, that you can testify in person or on Zoom to basically read a 2-minute statement and explain like why funding for these programs is important for you and your family. Next slide. We also have a one-click action alert where you can email the mayor and ask him to save all of these programs. The sign up for updates and to get involved, that's to join CEC's mailing list. So we send out like email blasts basically whenever we have new information, whenever we have new ways for folks to take action if they're interested. State budget. So state budget, foundation aid is the largest source of funding from the state to New York City Public Schools and to other districts around the state. And it is a formula that distributes funding on a per pupil basis, so for each student, to districts. And it's been around, I'll talk a little bit about the history in a moment. It's been around since 2007. Right now it's being re-examined for basically the first time since then. And go ahead to the next slide. It's a huge source of funding. About a quarter of New York City Public Schools' budget this year comes from foundation aid. It's used in a variety of ways. In New York City, it's primarily used for individual school budgets. You can go to the next slide. And for various programs, including many of the ones that were just saved in last year's budget. And this funding is not going to expire. Next slide. It's long-term and it's baselined. But how much funding we get from the state through foundation aid is going to depend, will change what New York City is able to do and what continue. So these are some of the programs that were previously funded with expired federal funding, are now funded long-term through these state dollars. So 500 school social workers and psychologists, some of more preschool special education supports, community schools. You'll see that on this list and the other, it's because there's multiple funding streams supporting community schools. So that 14 million that's expiring, that's New York City funding. This is other community schools are getting supported through foundation aid funding. So how it works, it's really complicated, but you don't need to understand the details to advocate. Basically the formula sets a base amount of funding for every student in the state that districts get X dollars to educate a student. And then that funding amount is adjusted to account for inflation, to account for differences in costs in different areas of the state. So obviously it's much more expensive to live in New York City than rural communities upstate. So school districts have to pay teachers higher salaries in order to be able to live here. So there's an adjustment for that. And then they also make some adjustments for student need where they add additional weight. So that's essentially additional funding for students living in poverty, students with disabilities, and English language learners. How do we get here? This is a very brief timeline. If you've heard of the campaign for fiscal equity, that's essentially where this came from back in the 90s. A group of parents, led by now State Senator Robert Jackson, sued the state, arguing that their kids weren't receiving the education they were entitled to under the state constitution. There's a whole lot of parent organizing. Eventually, the parents won, the courts ruled in favor of them and said that the state had to come up with a fair needs-based formula that led to the creation of Foundation Aid in 2007 to more equitably distribute funding for school districts. Next slide. However, the state then repeatedly failed to actually fund the formula, first because of the recession, and then there were lots of reasons why it did not get fully funded, and there was a lot of continued parent advocacy. Folks marched to Albany from New York City in protest to try to get adequate funding. In 2021, the governor and the legislature finally committed to a 3-year phase-in of full foundation and funding. 2023 was the first time schools started the school year with the full amount of foundation aid that they were owed from the state. So where we are now, obviously, it's great that they finally funded the formula for the first time. But at this point, the formula is super outdated. Most parts of it haven't changed since it was created in 2007. And so as a result, state funding for education hasn't really kept up with rising costs and changing needs. So back in 2002, the city and the state contributed about the same amount to the New York City Public Schools education budget. Now the city is contributing 57%, the state contributes 37%. So it's been a big drop essentially in the proportion of city schools budget that is being funded by the state. So time for change. What was it like in 2007? If you were like me and are in denial that you have aged 18 years since 2007, it's just a quick reminder that was a while ago. It was the year Obama launched his first campaign for president, first iPhone came out, Twitter was only a year old, it was not owned by Elon Musk. It was a different time, and a lot has changed in city schools in addition to the world changing. Next slide. So this is just a few examples, like COVID-19 pandemic, new class size law that only applies to New York City. We've added 2 new grades, 3K and pre-K. Lots of changes in technology. There's a youth mental health crisis. There's been a huge increase in student homelessness in New York City since this formula was first created. There's been a big increase in the number of children who are diagnosed with autism, both in New York and nationally. There's been a whole lot of changes that the formula does not account for because it was created so long ago. So what now? Where are we presenting this now? Is because the state is examining the formula for the first time in over 15 years. Last year, the state budget funded basically a think tank called the Rockefeller Institute to study the formula and recommend potential changes to update it, with the idea that the governor would then review those proposed changes and decide which ones to include in her budget. Any changes can have a huge impact on how much funding New York City and other districts get from the state. Also, just to clarify, whenever I say district in this context, New York City counts as one school district. It's not the way we typically think of districts in New York City, where it's District 15. This is all of New York City gets one big chunk of funding from the state. If you're familiar with the Fair Student Funding formula, that's the city-based formula for how the city distributes money to individual schools. This is talking about the amount the state gives to New York City as a whole and gives to other districts around the state as well. So the Rockefeller Institute study, it's more than 300 pages long, was released in early December. It included a menu of different possible changes to the foundation aid formula. Governor's budget proposal adopts just a couple of those changes that were recommended by the Rockefeller Institute report. And the upshot is it would shortchange New York City schools. The changes she proposed on their own would result in city schools getting almost $350 million less than we would without those changes. Obviously, we don't want city schools to get less money than they deserve when we know the needs are really great. So the proposal both of her proposed changes have to do with how the formula accounts for students from low income communities. So somewhat confusingly, there's both a weight for low income students and then a weight for students in poverty. So the low income rate, the change you proposed is a good one. It would bring more research to New York City schools. It's also just a better way of counting the number of low income students. She is proposed, and this is in line with what Rockefeller suggested, replacing the current metric, which is the number of students who qualify for free or reduced price lunch, with a broader measure of economically disadvantaged students. This is something the city and the state already collect, so they already have this information. And it's slightly broader. It includes students who are lunch eligible, but also students who are eligible for other types of assistance programs, basically, any kind of public benefits. And it's just a more accurate way of counting low income students. So this would be good for New York City and would bring more funding. The other change, oh, can you go back? Sorry. The other change, the separate poverty weight, which is a separate part of the formula. Right now, the foundation aid formula is using data from the 2000 census to determine how many students are in poverty in a given district. Obviously, that's ridiculous. It needs to be updated. The proposal for updating it is to replace it with a 3-year average of the small area income and poverty estimates, or SAPE. This is another figure that comes from the Census Bureau, and it would actually decrease funding for New York City schools. Next slide now. So what is SAPE? Another census measure. It's based on the federal poverty guidelines, which are very, very low. Currently just $32,150 for a family of 4. Makes no adjustments for the local cost of living. It's the same nationally. So it's the same whether you're living in Manhattan or whether you're living in, like, I don't know, Oklahoma. It costs a lot more to live in New York City than in many other places in the state and many other places in the country. Another concern with SAPE is that it's including students in public and private schools. Obviously, New York City has a lot of wealth in addition to a lot of poverty. This is counting all those students whose parents are sending them to a private school as well when it's determining how many students in poverty are living within the boundaries of any given school district. So on its own, not a great way to measure student poverty. It would result in New York City receiving less funding. Overall, because the formula is really complicated, there are a lot of other parts. Overall, New York City will still see an increase in foundation aid in the coming year because of other parts of the formula, but that increase is going to be $350 million less than it would be without the governor's proposed changes. You can go to the next slide. So again, there's a lot of needs, as I'm sure you all know. 146,000 students experienced homelessness last year. The economic disadvantage number, which really goes to show how absurdly low the federal poverty guidelines are. 700,000 New York City students are in the economically disadvantaged category. Over 40% of families with children had trouble affording food in 2023. Obviously, there's a lot of need. It's absurd for us to be losing money that's targeted to help schools support students who are living in poverty. Again, just more things. Our needs are too significant to miss out on funding. There's been obviously the increase in newcomer immigrant students arriving in schools over the past few years. State law that requires us to lower class sizes. The state hasn't provided any additional funding to help New York City actually implement that. The IBO has estimated it'll cost New York City like 1.5 to 1.9, I think, billion dollars to be able to implement that law. But the state hasn't provided any funding to help hire the teachers, the staff that are needed to make that happen. And then federal stimulus funding expired last year, and that was being used to pay for a whole bunch of key programs, staff and services, things we can't afford to lose. So what can state leaders do? Big picture, the state needs to make sure that the city isn't negatively impacted by any change to the formula. We don't want New York City to lose hundreds of millions of dollars that we should otherwise be getting. Any changes that we do make should better capture student needs and account for the variation, in costs in different parts of the state. So first recommendation, is to update the regional cost index. So this is a measure that is intended to account for differences in costs, the cost of providing education in different regions of the state. It has not been updated since 2006, basically same as it was when this formula was first created. The Board of Regents, the Rockefeller Institute study both recommended updating this, because much like the old census data, very out of date, costs have changed in different parts of the state. The governor did not include this recommendation in her budget. We would like it to be included in the final budget. Just today, the Assembly and the Senate released their one house budgets, their own proposals that they'll now negotiate with the governor. Both the Assembly and the Senate did include an increase to the regional cost index for New York City in their budget, so we're super happy about that. The actual amount it would drive to New York City schools, IBO's estimate on the previous slide, that was based on the Rockefeller Institute's recommendation for how much to increase it. I believe the Senate and the Assembly proposals, it's a bit less than that, but it's still a significant chunk of change and would be great if that makes it in. CEC's next recommendation is to add a weight for students in temporary housing and students in the foster care system. So both of these populations of students have significant needs, and we think the formula should recognize that schools need additional funding to appropriately support them, to meet their needs and ensure their success. So similar to how the formula recognizes that schools need additional funding for students with disabilities and English language learners to be able to provide classes, high quality services, it should similarly provide additional funding for students who are homeless or in foster care. And the city-based care student funding formula did recently add a weight for students in temporary housing. So we're basically saying the state funding formula should do the same thing. This unfortunately did not make it into the governor's budget. It's not in either of the one house budgets. Still something we'd really like to see, because right now foundation aid formula doesn't give districts any extra funds to help meet these students' needs, and they're concentrated in New York City. Last recommendation, we would like the state to consider other ways of measuring poverty beyond just the straight SAFE number that's in the governor's budget right now. So the Rockefeller Institute study recommended potentially using higher weights based on concentration of poverty, which would drive more funding to New York City. Or another option would be adding a higher poverty threshold for certain communities, or some sort of cost of living adjustment, basically to recognize the fact that it is much more expensive to live in New York City than in other parts of the state. $32,000 is a lot further some places than others. So formula should recognize that accordingly. Steve originally was recommending a number of other changes related to the formula. The executive budget only includes changes related to those weights for low-income students, students in poverty. There's a lot still missing. The formula, even if we were to get an increase in the RCI, the regional cost index, and a weight for students in temporary housing, and changes to the way we measure poverty there, the formula still would not be perfect. Like, we would still want ongoing review and changes. These are basically the most immediate and possible things we are focused on right now. So what else is still missing? We'd like to see an increase in the weights for students with disabilities and English language learners. The Assembly's one house budget actually did include an increase in the weight for L's. We'd also like for the formula to include funding for students in 3K and pre-K. Right now, it's only for students in grades K through 12. New York City does receive some funding from the state for pre-K, but we've basically been paying for 3K entirely on our own. Our point is that early childhood education is now more universally considered like part of the same schools, part of the same system as essential, not optional. And the formula should be treating preschool students the same as students in grades K through 12. The way that formula determines the base amount of funding for each student is also not great, we'd like to re-examine that and look at like what are other measures. Funding for class size, as I mentioned, that the state hasn't provided any funding for that. And then ongoing review, we shouldn't wait another 18 years to look at it again. It's not great. Timeline for this, governor's budget was released in January. The Senate and Assembly budget proposals were released today. The governor, state, and legislature are now going to be negotiating the budget. The deadline is April 1st, so they don't always meet that. So it's very much crunch time as far as being able to make a difference here. Basically what I've already said, we're really driving it home. Our biggest priority is that the budget not shortchange New York City schools, that we don't make changes to the formula that would result in city schools receiving less funding than we otherwise would. So we also, you can go to the next slide. We have an action alert, another one click to email Governor Hochul and key legislators who are involved in negotiating the budget, asking them to make these changes to the formula. We still have to update it to acknowledge the one house budget that just came out. So the actual letter itself will get tweaked in the next couple days. But feel free to send it now. It's still, you know, accurate. And then that's the same QR code for getting involved for our mailing list. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
I know I just talked really fast.
Shanice, leave the QR codes up on the screen in case other people want to go to them, and then we'll go to questions.
Question, yep. So is there anybody joining us on Zoom who has a comment or question about the presentation? You can also put comments or questions in the chat if that is easier. Hey, are there any comments or questions on the Spanish line?
No questions on the Spanish line.
Any questions on the Mandarin line?
So far, no question, no comments from Mandarin line.
Okay. How about the Bangla line?
No comments here in Bangla line.
We had a thank you for the presentation.
You're very
Any questions or comments for people joining us in person?
Yeah.
So it sounds like the differences that can be made in the city and in the state is around convincing politicians to include these changes in their executive level decision making.
Yes, so the state budget, we're now at the point where the legislature and the governor are negotiating, so we want them to include these changes in the final budget for the coming year. At the city level, it's both getting the mayor to include it in his executive budget and also pressuring city council. Last year, a lot of council members were great allies and really advocated for the continuation of a lot of the programs that were funded with expiring federal dollars. So we're hoping many of them will be strong advocates again, but obviously that requires pressure. They need to hear from the constituents that, hey, we really like these programs. They need to continue.
Thank you. Anybody else? There's another thank you on here. Let's go to CEC questions or comments. Ronaldo?
Thank you so much for this very informative presentation. I guess my question, so I'm just a little bit confused in the grander scheme of things, how we have a board of regents that purportedly is in favor of maintaining and expanding all these programs, yet we don't see much advocacy from, and we have a legislature that runs on these topics and gets elected and yet doesn't line up to support it. And then we have an entire campaign year after year, you know, at intervals for mayoral control of this system. And the very first thing that happened when the mayor's control was reauthorized was the slicing of, and proposal for the slicing of these funds. So, you know, I mean, like, we've been working on the whole redoing the formula for fair student funding for a while to include like foster kids and kids with students temporary housing and like tagging kids with disabilities at certain age intervals to have more and whatever. But at what point does the advocacy, you know, shift from this sort of like budget cycle aligned one to a larger accountability of people in power? Because, you know, Advocates for Children has such a loud voice, like a huge platform in our city. And it's just really disappointing that we have given control of our school system to someone so reckless and fundamentally incapable of selecting appropriate leadership and managing funds appropriately. Like, I just happened to notice that $50 million around each approval of mayoral control went to media outlets so that those people could be convinced to write articles on his behalf, right? Like, it's just very confusing. So what does Advocates for Children ever like sort of get into the space of the larger questions of who controls the school system?
To some extent, we haven't taken an official position. I think when it comes to mayoral control, my personal feelings about the current mayor aside, I think we have a lot of concerns, like that we don't think the current system is perfect by any means, but returning to what we had before is also not a great solution. I think we would very much be supportive of like a broader conversation about like, okay, so what should school governance look like? I think pre-mayoral control, what we often saw was that the needs, having mayoral control has in some ways made it possible for the populations we specifically serve at Advocates for Children who are often left behind, who get pushed aside and forgotten. So students with disabilities, adult students who are homeless, students in foster care. It's easier for them to get ignored in favor of students who are simpler to serve when things are very, very decentralized. And that's really what we saw pre-mayoral control, which is before my time. But historically, that was very much the issue, where centralizing things did provide some advantages in terms of being able to roll out big changes that affect the whole system, rather than having to do everything piecemeal. That said, a lot of people have very valid criticisms of mayoral control and the instability that can result from having, you know, every time the political situation changes, that there can be major shifts, and it can be damaging when you're trying to roll out a lot of changes, take more than a mayoral term to really go into effect and be implemented well. So I don't know that it really answers your question. Like, other than that, I totally hear you.
I
And
appreciate you highlighting the benefits of it. I'm heartbroken about the 55 million in pre-K special ed funding.
yeah,
And and that money comes from state and local sources, you know, for the most part, like the feds only give us a certain
Yeah.
portion. And it's really just this is just very hard to accept.
yes.
That's all, sorry.
No, I mean, I agree. It's also like they are legally required to provide preschool special education classes, and they don't year after year. I'm sick of writing policy papers about it.
Right.
So it's absolutely egregious. Also, the mayor himself promised, I think like 2 years ago now, he held a big press conference where he promised that like he was gonna fix preschool special education, he was gonna provide the funding that for every kid who needed it. Obviously it hasn't happened. There's kids who need a seat right now who don't have one. So that's infuriating for all of us, and especially for the families of kids who aren't getting the services they need at a point in time when they can have a huge impact. And it's also, it doesn't make sense like fiscally for the city either, because when kids don't get the support they need early on, they often need more intensive, more expensive services once they get to kindergarten and first grade. So.
Hans?
No, it's good. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you to take time to be here with us. Thank you.
Of course. I'm happy to answer any questions, by email too, if you have. Think of more questions later.
Sounds good. Nancy?
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that I arrived late and missed this very important presentation, the first part of it. Will we have slides of these?
Yes, I sent them, I printed out a couple copies.
Okay.
If you want.
You emailed
Yeah,
me
I would
yesterday.
like a copy.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add a comment. So the universal pre-K, I availed myself at the tail end of that. I have 3 kids and I just thank Mayor Bill de Blasio for making that happen. And I remember that foundation aid money not coming to our schools for many, many years when Governor Cuomo was at the helm, and just thanking Governor Hochul for releasing that money because we just did not get it when he was mayor. So just a little history, remember, some things are coming back. So-
And our allies at the Alliance for Quality Education were like really pivotal in actually making that happen. There was a lot of advocacy.
Yeah, and it
parents that
was
went-
really harming New York
Yeah.
City schools,
Yeah.
and this was, right, so when Hochul came in, that money was released, and of course, thank you. That was pretty much it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and certainly our role is to get on the phone and. I'm sorry.
So yes, we would.
Thank you.
Love to hear your support.
Leslie?
No, thank you so much. This is great.
What's your name?
Dinalda and Nancy just, both of you, said what I wanted to say. You spoke to the elephant in the room. Same words. Yeah, I mean, when you put up the slide about like, why didn't we get foundation? Oh, I don't know. We had a certain governor who wasn't releasing it, who's now gonna be running for mayor and have mayoral control, and it opens up a big question about what is gonna be the future of our schools. And I was perplexed by the loss of special ed preschool funding because they are legally entitled to that, so it's just gonna result in more lawsuits.
Yes, which is gonna cost the city more money.
So it doesn't even make any
Yes.
sense to not fund that at all. So I just love you guys. You guys are on top of it every year in December. You're ready in January with all of these numbers, and we just really appreciate you,
Thank you, that's nice to hear.
Yeah, because nobody else is doing this work.
And please send families our way if you hear of families, for example, who do not have a preschool special education class. And we will do our best to help. And we can often escalate things to folks high up at the DOE. Doesn't always result in a resolution, but sometimes it does.
And that information is in the handout, how to reach you guys.
Is it? This presentation, that's Advocates for Children specifically. AFC, advocatesforchildren.org. We have a helpline that anyone can call. And that information is on our website. I don't think it's in this because this PowerPoint is for our broader coalition, which is a lot of groups.
Vanessa?
Thank you. This was great. I have somewhat of a far-reaching question, which is with the looming threats that we have from this administration on cutting back on federal funding.
The federal administration.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is,
Like, yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
In downsizing on Title I, Title II, Title III, and a lot of the programs that are going to be affected that are not currently in the proposal of the budget proposal for next year's state funding or city funding that you spoke of. Are there any gaps in those budgets proposed by the mayor in the state that that we're not looking at when it comes to the deficit we're also gonna have from federal money?
So it is important to note that as of yet, we have not lost federal funding.
Right. It's
For education,
speculative, but
yes. So I think our position has generally been like, be prepared. We're obviously watching things very closely, but not to panic, or we have to, and not to alarm parents as well. Like a lot of parents are really freaked out about what's gonna happen with special education, understandably. Rights have not changed as of right now. So I think a lot is to be determined as far as what happens. To some extent, I mean, it's also hard given everything that's happened in the past like month and a half, like our initial. When my supervisor and I had a conversation about this right after the election, I think we were kind of trying to take comfort in the fact that funding for education really benefits the whole country, like GOP, they have kids with disabilities too. They also want IDEA funding. In theory, you know, representatives don't want their local schools to be losing funding. Given some of the things that have happened in the past month and a half, whether or not that actually holds, that, you know, folks care about their individual districts, even if they don't generally support funding for kids more broadly.
I guess
Yeah.
more narrowly, my question is, if the proposals that we will be advocating for do come to fruition, would that fill the holes left by potential withdrawal of federal funding?
No. So federal funding is, like, relatively speaking, a fairly small portion of New York City's budget, but it's still a very large chunk of change that it would be a large hole. And no, these changes on their own would not fill that at all.
The last meeting, when they gave a somebody, I can't even remember who gave the presentation, but it was, yeah.
Loretta Moy, yeah.
Yeah,
our
yeah.
budget person.
The budget person, and I think they said it was 8%.
No, 5.
5%, it was a single digit percent.
Yeah.
But that was equivalent to still like $2 billion.
Yeah.
Right, and the kinds of programs that it funds are just critical.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of money. Yeah, even proportionally. Yeah.
Katina?
No, thank you.
Thank
So
you.
stay tuned, I'm sure we will.
May I just ask one quick, I was just looking on your website.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Real quick, I'll make it real quick. I noticed that you also serve charter schools. And one of the things I've been trying to understand is the funding for charter schools. I've been here, I'm almost ending a 2-year term and I keep asking this question. Are they obliged to spend the funds that they receive in a certain manner, like the DOE is? For example, you have budgeted items. I see a lot of TV commercials for the charter schools, so that's why it just kind of like, where's that money coming from? And are they obliged to, let's say, serve kids with disabilities? Are they are there budget items there?
So I can't really speak to the budgeting specifically, but they do have to follow federal civil rights laws, such as educating kids with disabilities, educating English language learners, whether or not they actually do that. To the extent we work with charter schools, most of our work with charters has been focused on making sure that they obey federal laws so that, there are certain like rules and regulations around school discipline, particularly where discipline codes have to like do certain things, you know, give notification to the parents. If you have the opportunity for hearing, you can't just randomly be kicking kids out of class. So a lot of our advocacy is focused around making sure that charter schools are following like these very basic laws as far as civil rights protections for students. As far as the budget, I mean, there are rules, but I can't speak to the budget specifically. Yeah, we focus much more on traditional public schools.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you so much. Great, so, I want to put it to the council if we should go back to the way the agenda was written with the business items, before we move on to another presentation. Yes? Okay, all right, council. All right, so we are going to turn it over to our recording secretary, Nancy, to do the vote on the minutes.
Okay. Boy, I haven't done this in such a long time. I don't remember the exact verbiage. Let's see, so I assume everyone has reviewed the minutes, and I guess at this point we will ask if anyone has any objections, or questions about the minutes. Yes. And so then, do we just do an omnibus?
Oh, right, we just, all right, so I guess nobody has any questions. Let's do them one by one. September 24th calendar meeting. Does anybody have any questions, concerns?
Okay, I'm just looking for it in the script. And I have not found it, sorry. My glasses are here. They are here, right? Approval of the minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Vote on the minutes, so. Motion to approve the, September 24th, 2024 calendar meeting minutes.
John, oh, you're making the motion and Jonathan
Yes.
seconded? Okay.
Am I allowed to?
Yes, you can make the motion.
So, and I'd like to make the motion to accept the October 8th, 2024 business meeting minutes.
I think we do one at a time or both at the same time?
One at a time. So now
It's just the two.
you're making the motion to adopt October 8th business meeting minutes?
Yes,
Okay.
I just made the motion. Does anyone second it?
Second. No. There's a second, and the minutes are adopted with no objections.
Thank you.
Oh, we have to do roll call.
Oh, we have to do roll call? All right, well, here we go. So, council member Antonia Ferraro. Copy pasting?
I'm copy and pasting. I vote yes.
Okay, Councilmember Leslie King.
Yes.
Councilmember Vanessa Gonzalez Roca.
Yes.
Yes. Councilmember Katina Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Jonathan Davis.
Yes.
Councilmember Hans Arieta.
Yes.
Councilmember Donald Chumney.
Yes.
And, let's see, there is no one else present.
They are not. Yeah.
So with that, we have,
We have, yes, the minutes are approved. Thank you. Okay. All right, now we have a draft statement on the executive orders. I'm gonna share my screen. And I'm gonna ask Katina if she wouldn't mind reading this.
Sure. Okay. Dear NYCPS Chancellor Melissa Aviles Ramos, the District 15 Community Education Council has heard from families expressing concern that several of the Trump administration's recent executive orders and recent federal Department of Education letters may negatively impact school funding and impede the rights of our diverse student body. In the absence of statements from NYCPS, we feel compelled to respond to concerns about the executive orders. As parent leaders, we share these concerns and we believe advocacy for all our children is more important than ever. We condemn the executive orders that will have a negative impact on education, including, but not limited to, ending radical indoctrination in K-12 schools, January 29th, 2025, keeping men out of women's sports, February 5th, 2025, defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government, January 20th, 2025. Expanding educational freedom and opportunity for families, January 29th, 2025. The terrain is constantly shifting and it is an open question as to how enforceable or legal these executive orders are. Legal analysts have called their legality and constitutionality into question, and numerous lawsuits have already been filed. What we do know is that the federal government cannot dictate to states and cities how their schools function and what curriculums they use. Regardless of questions of legality, there are workarounds to safeguard student rights, and we implore NYCPS to stay the course and develop these workarounds. What do we mean by workarounds? After the Supreme Court decided in Parents Involved in Community Schools versus Seattle School District No. 1 that K-12 schools could not consider race in admissions, the Obama administration issued guidance to help school districts understand how to integrate in compliance with Brown v. Board of Education by looking at race-neutral indicators of poverty. This formed the basis of District 15's choice-based middle school lottery. Moreover, executive orders and letters cannot be confused with Supreme Court decisions. We agree that discrimination is illegal and immoral. This is why District 15 eliminated the use of a discriminatory screening process that resulted in the second most racially segregated middle schools in the most racially segregated school system in the nation. Screens, be they academic, disciplinary, attendance, or talent-based, are proxies for discrimination. It is therefore crucial that NYCPS, together with school and community leaders, stay focused on the mission of ensuring that all children in New York City receive a high-quality education in a safe, caring environment, even in the face of federal overreach. CEC 15 has been reaffirming our organization's commitment to celebrating, protecting, and respecting all of our students at every single meeting. We have and will continue to demand that the DOE leadership resist attacks on students and teachers' civil rights, human rights, and First Amendment rights. We have been doing this through the issues we elevate at our public CEC meetings and through the resolutions the council has passed, such as the CEC 15's resolution to prevent and respond to hate speech, CEC 15 resolution to ensure equitable access to Omni cards for all NYC public school students, and the resolution opposing 60-day limitation on shelter stays for families of public school students. And we have been doing this through the banned and challenged books that President Antonia Ferraro Martinelli highlights in meetings. These books reflect identities celebrated by our Cultural and Heritage Month and holidays. For example, this month we celebrated Black History Month and Lunar New Year. To honor Black History Month, President Ferraro Martinelli featured All Because You Matter by Tammy Charles, which offers love, hope, and affirmation through the Black experience. And to honor Asian and immigrant families, she featured Drawn Together by Min Lee, which tells the story of a grandson and grandfather struggling to communicate across a language barrier, but find connection through art. CEC's recent legislative breakfast largely focused on the threats of this new administration. The event had more than 80 registrants, including elected officials, principals, teachers, and school staff, and parent leaders. Many important topics were raised, including SCA accountability, libraries, arts funding, protecting migrant and asylum-seeking families, school transportation, the importance of Title I funding, the importance of mental health professionals and mandated services, and the need to revise building utilization plans in buildings co-located with charter schools. Here again, CEC 15 featured banned and challenged books. These books were raffled to attendees. The list of books honored the experiences of the trans or gender questioning children of Native American, African American, Jewish, Hispanic, and immigrant children. The books included I Am Enough by Grace Byers, Hold On to Your Music by Mona Golovac and Lee Cohen, Dreamers by Yui Morales, Fry Bread by Kevin Noble-Maillard, Planting Stories by Annika Aldemoy Denise, When Aiden Became a Brother by Kyle Lukoff, We Are Still Here by Tracy Sorrell. These books were challenged in 2022 by the Northampton, PA Area School Board, which unanimously voted to table a donation of 50 books from The Conscious Kid, a nonprofit organization focused on equity and promoting healthy racial identity development. They rejected the donation after just 10 parents complained during a meeting. One of 10 parents or grandparents to object to the donation claimed, quote, The Conscious Kid uses Marxist critical race theory, end quote. Some of the people had not even read any of the books. President Ferraro Martinelli has stated that she feels that elevating banned books does what proclamations can't. Quote, by sharing these books, I aim to shine a spotlight on the creativity and excellence of writers whose work reflects the rich and varied lived experiences of children in our own communities, end quote, she said in a recent open letter. Quote, others may call it DEI, but I call it reality, end quote. CEC 15 will keep calm and carry on with the mission of supporting all our students, but we will also keep an eye on protecting the democratic infrastructure that makes supporting students possible. Protecting the independence of democratic institutions and functions must be a nonpartisan concern to all Americans. We call on NYCPS leadership to resist attacks on students and teachers' civil rights, human rights, and First Amendment rights using any and all channels available to you. We ask you to reassure families that you will stand by all our students.
Thank you.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, there's a couple of edits that I want to propose.
Okay.
On page 1, in the first paragraph, Is it still accurate to say, in the absence of statements from New York City Public Schools, given that our superintendent put out a statement,
Given the insufficiency of statements from NYCPS, I mean, they're pretty terse.
if they don't directly address the executive orders, so I guess it's still.
In the absence of clear statements, the absence of adequate statements.
I'm okay with adequate, do I put that in there?
I don't think I have.
Oh, okay, adequate statements, okay, and then on page 2, it, second paragraph, it just needs an S after school, so
Yeah.
second most racially segregated middle schools. I'll add that S in there. All right. That's all the edits that I saw.
And on the next page, the third page, just before the list of banned books, I think there's a that doesn't need to be there.
The list of books.
So these books were raffled to attendees. The list of books honor the experiences of the transit.
Oh, okay.
I think we can just.
Oh, thank you.
There's also an extra and in the paragraph above. I feel like, teachers, comma, school staff, comma, like get rid of that, teachers and school staff.
I think that was grouping them together
Was it?
intentionally.
Okay,
We could get rid
but I
of
feel like then principals should be in there too,
Right.
because that's a part of the whole school.
principal
they're-
teachers.
Okay. Okay, I'll take out that and put a
The most
comma.
important.
Principals, teachers, school staff, and parent leaders. Okay, all right. All right, so I will turn it back to the parliamentarian.
Okay, so any questions or comments from people joining us on Zoom about the resolution that was just read?
Just that I support it. Yes, I'm so glad to hear this is happening.
Thank you, Jay. Any other questions or comments from people joining us on Zoom?
Yeah, I feel really lucky that our daughter is part of this school system that has so many caring educators and parents and advocates involved. Just this is tangentially related. I've been concerned about this hotline that the Department of Justice set up so that people can tip them off about DEI. And it's, apart from the obvious problems, it's so broad that one doesn't know what to make of it. Does it mean my child has a Black teacher, my child learned about Hispanic history, my child, so I'm wondering, does anybody know, or is anybody asking the Department of Education what protections there will be for teachers if somebody, in quotes, informs on them? Thank you.
Didn't Alvarez speak about that last time?
I think that's a great question for Alvarez and
Yeah.
a question for the union
Yeah.
ultimately.
So I think maybe at the calendar meeting in 2 weeks, when the superintendent is there, he's probably the best person to respond to that question in terms of what him and his office and the larger DOE are thinking in terms of, if it gets to that, how they will provide support for teachers and staff. And
that question feels important to me. I'll make a note of it to
Yeah.
make sure that it gets asked there. Thank you.
excellent question.
Thank you so much. It's such a beautiful letter. Thank you.
The other thing is, there was a letter that came out this week from Tish James. and the attorneys general of Illinois and Massachusetts that directly responded to the executive orders and the illegality of them. So I would take a look at that.
Yeah, I mean, there have been so many legal challenges to these executive orders that most of them are unconstitutional and not legally binding. And so it's very scary what's happening, but my hope is that there are enough people fighting and advocating for what is right. And that I know that just in conversations with the superintendent and others in the DOE, that the intention is to protect our schools, our students, our staff and teachers. And, I hope that they have concrete answers, but, knock on wood, hopefully it never even gets to that because it's unconstitutional what's happening.
Well, it's getting there.
Any other questions or comments for people on Zoom? Anybody in the Bangla line?
No questions in Bangla line.
Anybody in the Mandarin line?
No questions here.
Anybody in the Spanish line?
Nobody in the Spanish line.
Any questions or comments from people here in person?
Great work.
CEC questions, comments, Katina?
No.
Vanessa?
Thank you so much for working on this. We need this.
Antonia?
No.
Leslie? Nancy?
Great.
Hans? Alden? Thank you so much.
All right.
I move to vote.
Okay, so Nancy, I cut in the names. Second under there. So Jonathan made the motion.
And I seconded. Okay, and that was the roll call. Councilmember Antonio Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Leslie King.
Yes.
Councilmember Vanessa Gonzalez Wilka.
Yes.
Councilmember Nancy Cruz, yes. Councilmember Katina Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Jonathan Davis.
Yes.
Councilmember Hans Arietta.
Yes.
Councilmember Donalda Chumney.
Yes.
So with that, it is
Great. Wonderful. That passes. All right, the next resolution is a resolution from the PEP affirming the status of New York City public schools as a welcoming citywide district for all students. I'm gonna share my screen, and would somebody volunteer to read that one?
I can read it.
Okay, great.
Okay, this is the resolution affirming the status of New York City Public Schools as a welcoming citywide district for all students. From the Panel for Educational Policy. Final resolution. Whereas the New York City Panel for Educational Policy panel wholeheartedly embraces the commitment of New York City Public Schools, NYCPS, to create and maintain a safe and welcoming environment for all students, staff, and families. And whereas it remains the policy of NYCPS to prohibit unlawful discrimination, harassment, and retaliation on the basis of sexual orientation, gender or sex, race or ethnicity, ethnic group identification, ancestry, nationality, national origin, religion, color, mental or physical disability, age, immigration status, marital status, registered domestic partner status, genetic information, political belief or affiliation, military status, or on the basis of a person's association with a person or group with one or more of these actual or perceived characteristics in the educational programs or activities NYCPS operates. And whereas harassment, discrimination, and bias-based harm have no place in New York City public school communities and will not be tolerated. And whereas NYCPS students, staff, and their families originate from many different countries besides the United States, may live in households where family members have different immigration and citizenship statuses, may be beneficiaries of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, Temporary Protected Status, TPS, or similar forms of humanitarian relief, regardless of immigration status. And whereas in Plyler versus Doe, 1982, the United States Supreme Court ensures all children, regardless of their immigration status, have the right to a free K-12 public education, and this ruling prohibits public schools from denying enrollment to undocumented immigrant children, affirming their right to an education. And whereas New York State Human Rights Law, Section 4, states, "It shall be an unlawful discriminatory practice for an educational institution to deny the use of its facilities to any person otherwise qualified, or to permit the harassment of any student or applicant by reason of his race, color, religion, disability, national origin, citizenship, or immigration status." And whereas, as per New York State Governor's Executive Order 170 and New York City Administrative Codes, sections 9-131, 9-205, 10-178, 14-154, limit the interaction of local law enforcement agencies with U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement, ICE, and whereas New York City Public Schools staff and other personnel working in schools are subject to the provisions of Chancellor's Regulation A412, and whereas NYCPS Chancellor's Regulation A780 defines the rights of students in temporary housing, and federal, state, and local statutes and regulations protect the confidentiality of student information, and NYCPS Chancellor's Regulation A820 outlines the data and privacy protection to which students are entitled. And whereas NYCPS reflects the diverse population of the world, which each district celebrates in many ways through a student's daily experience. Therefore, be it resolved that the New York City Panel for Educational Policy urges the following. 1, NYCPS will continue to provide training to its staff and collaborate with union partners and immigration advocates to offer coaching and support for students and their families on immigrant rights, potential avenues for immigration relief, and the overall health and well-being of those affected. 2, NYCPS will provide multi-language printed and online resources for its students, staff, and their families in partnership with the city on how to obtain immigration legal assistance, health and mental health care, and public safety support. 3, NYCPS will advocate for and support the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, Temporary Protective Status, TPS, and refugee resettlement programs, as well as oppose the creation of a Muslim registry system and any efforts to erode civil rights protections for a diverse community. NYCPS will work alongside educators and elected officials committed to maintaining a curriculum that reflects our students' identities and lived experiences, and protecting our schools as spaces where our students feel safe, welcome, and valued for who they are. 5, NYCPS personnel shall not inquire about or record a student's or a family member's immigration status, and shall not disclose any student record information, including without limitation, the immigration status of any student or other personally identifiable information, except in accordance with applicable law. 6, NYCPS does not consent to granting non-local law enforcement agencies, including the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, access to school facilities, students, or student records for immigration enforcement purposes, absent confirmation from NYCPS legal counsel that there exist exigent circumstances, a judicial warrant, a court order, or validity issued subpoena. 7, NYCPS will collaborate with the New York City Police Department, NYPD, School Safety Division to provide training and reaffirm that school safety agents, SSA, have no authority to enforce federal immigration law, and SSAs will not participate in federal immigration enforcement activities. 8, SSAs are prohibited from inquiring about or recording any information regarding an individual's immigration status. SSA shall not hold people on ICE detainers, shall not respond to ICE notification or transfer requests, shall not make arrests based on civil immigration warrants, and shall not allow ICE to use campus facilities for immigration enforcement purposes. 9, NYCPS personnel shall treat all students equitably in the receipt of school services, including, but not limited to, the free lunch program, pupil transportation, and all instructional programming. 10, NYCPS will continue to welcome all students, staff, and their families regardless of immigration status.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Questions or comments from people on Zoom? Anybody on the Spanish line?
No questions on the Spanish line.
Anybody on the Mandarin line?
No question from the Mandarin line.
Any questions or comments from the Bangla line?
No question or comment from Bangla line.
We have just some comments saying people support it and thank you. Questions or comments in person? Thumbs up. Questions or comments from CEC? Nancy?
No, fully supported. It's nice to hear.
Hans?
No questions.
Ronaldo?
It was passed in January, it's just as urgent today.
Yep. I move to vote.
Okay.
Okay, and so. So
I think we need a
is there a
second.
second? Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a second. Thank you, Leslie. And now I will go through the roll call. Okay. Every time I open my Zoom. Sorry. I've got a mess of files here. Okay. Councilmember Antonio Ferrara.
Yes.
Councilmember Leslie King.
Yes.
Councilmember Vanessa Gonzalez Uoka.
Yes.
Councilmember Nancy Cruz, yes. Councilmember Katina Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Jonathan Davis.
Yes.
Councilmember Manzarieta.
Yes.
And Councilmember Donalda Chumney.
Yes. Okay, it's approved. There we go. All right, 2 down, 1 more to go. This is a resolution to demand that the New York City Public Schools deactivate from X and Meta-owned accounts. I'm gonna share my screen. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time. And we're gonna have an organization come to a meeting very soon, to talk about, social media and protecting students online. All right, so I'll read this one. Okay, whereas New York City Public Schools maintains an X account previously known as Twitter with, I think that's 255.1 million followers. Thousand followers, okay, 1,000 followers, sorry. Whereas New York City Public Schools maintains a Facebook account with, 209,000 followers. Whereas New York City Public Schools maintains an Instagram account with 112,000 followers. Whereas New York City Public Schools regularly posts to these social media accounts multiple times per day. The posts contain photos and videos of children in schools, information about events, reposting of statements by the chancellor, and regular updates about everything from enrollment deadlines to weather-related remote days. Whereas New York City Public Schools directs families to X, Facebook, and Instagram from the DOE website. Whereas the mission and vision of New York City Public Schools emphasize a commitment to creating and supporting learning environments that reflect the diversity of New York City. We believe all students benefit from diverse and inclusive schools and classrooms. Whereas in June 2024, CEC 15 voted to support CEC 15 resolution to prevent and respond to hate speech in New York City Public Schools. The resolution reaffirmed our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion and clarified existing frameworks for addressing hate speech. Whereas New York City Public Schools responded to the resolution as follows. I want to thank you for your thoughtful and comprehensive resolution and would highlight our commitment to fostering respect, inclusion, and empathy in our school system and stand against bigotry and hate in all their forms. Whereas their response also highlighted actions New York City Public Schools was taking to address rises in hate speech, notably various professional trainings. This fall, we are launching implicit bias modules and asynchronous online professional learning series designed to help educators and administrators build and sustain cultural awareness to interrupt implicit bias. In addition, we will be launching the Uplifting Our Humanity, Eliminating Discrimination training available to all New York City Public Schools employees, which is focused on Chancellor's Regulations A830 and the DOE's anti-discrimination policy. Whereas discrimination and harassment are defined by Chancellor's Regs A830, 831, and 832. Whereas all New York City Public School educators are mandated to report incidents of hate speech and aggression within the online occurrence reporting system, ORS, and to the Office of Special Investigation in accordance with Chancellor's Regs A830, 831, and 832. Whereas New York City Public Schools has an anti-hate hotline, and as of November 2024, published an update stating New York City Public Schools has zero tolerance for hate, bigotry, or racism of any kind. Whereas X, formerly known as Twitter, is a social media company that knowingly provides a platform for and profits from hate speech. Whereas hate speech garners more views on X and therefore benefits X. According to a recent study by the Center for Countering Digital Hate, the platform seemingly rewarded these accounts for producing controversial, sensational, and engaging content with turbocharging follower growth, visibility, and wherever revenue sharing is permitted, therefore increased revenues. Whereas X profits from X premium subscriptions to accounts that broadcast hate speech content. The subscription provides prioritized ranking in the algorithm, meaning some subscribers are given priority over those of non-premium users. Whereas in addition to subscribers, X depends on advertisers. Whereas according to the Center for Countering Digital Hate, X appears to be profiting from advertisements that appear alongside hate speech on X. Whereas the New York City Public Schools X account attracts followers, which contribute to the success and long-term sustainability of the social media site that exposes families and students to hate speech in direct conflict with New York City Public Schools stated values. Whereas education law 5002, Section 7 directs the Commissioner of Education to issue regulations and guidelines with respect to appropriate school advertising. The Commissioner details regulations at 8 New York City NYCRR Section 126.3A, which requires that advertising conducted by or on behalf of a school shall not be false, misleading, deceptive, or fraudulent, and shall be consistent with the provisions of Article 22A of the General Business Law. Article 22A of the General Business Law is titled Consumer Protection from Deceptive Acts and Practices. Whereas Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, recently announced the social media company is ending fact-checking completely and loosening rules around hate speech and abuse, particularly with regard to immigration status, sexuality, and gender identity. Whereas according to a November 2024 Danish study by digital accountability organization Digital Ansvar, the Meta product Instagram directs teens to self-harm sites and fails to use existing technology to minimize the problem of self-harm content on their platform. Whereas in this way, Meta products interfere with New York City Public Schools' efforts to provide mental health services to students, which include guidance counselors, school psychologists, school-based health centers, and the New York City 988 hotline. Whereas New York City Public Schools information should not be disseminated on platforms that are unsafe for minors. Whereas continuing to promote New York City Public Schools on X, Facebook, and Instagram could be misconstrued as an endorsement of the platform's corporate policies that conflict with education laws and regulations, as well as ideas promoted on the platform that conflict with New York City Public Schools' mission, vision, and services provided. Whereas there are alternative social media sites to X, Facebook, and Instagram that employ protocols to filter hate speech and fact check. Therefore, be it resolved that CEC 15 demands New York City Public Schools deactivate all DOE New York City Public Schools X and Meta accounts, and be it resolved New York City Public Schools migrate to more responsible platforms with protocols aligned to relevant education laws and the mission and vision of the largest school system in the United States of America. All right.
Okay. Any comments or questions from those joining us on Zoom?
I fully support this statement, and I'm so impressed by all your work. I'd just like to add that these platforms are used to bully educators and librarians constantly, and also to spread dangerous misinformation about vaccines that puts children's lives at risk. So thank you for this statement. I totally support it.
Great, thank you. Somebody wrote in the comments that this tech worker applauds the resolution.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions or comments from people on Zoom? Anybody from the Mandarin line?
Okay, so far no any comments from Mandarin line.
Okay, anybody from the Bangla line?
No question in Bangla line.
Anybody from the Spanish line?
No questions or comments on the Spanish line.
Anybody in person, question or comment? Hallelujah. CEC questions or comments? Katina?
No.
Vanessa? Tony?
No.
I can just remember being under the tyranny of having to open a Twitter account and then like post to it actively and like being required to like hashtag all this stuff and how much of my actual day as an employee was required to like put on social media things that were like PR for the organization, but also just really affirming to Cheryl Watson Harris herself, who's a former leader. Thank you. But I guess I'm struck, but I know that we haven't had, as far as I'm aware, any discussion of this resolution yet. So, I mean, I think that people who are charged with in leadership roles in our organization would be delighted if they didn't have to endure all that nonsense and produce it and churn it out. But in some ways, it feels like this is suppressing a channel for speech. And that kind of concerns me a lot. Because I don't know of any other forums where NYCPS can actually issue a message and receive feedback from anyone. And I realize that sometimes lately they turn off the comments so that no one can say much back. But I guess my question is like, and I'm sorry for the big prelude, I just had to think of it as I was talking. Where would people interact with the system in terms of technology and social media if it was not on X, Facebook, or Instagram?
There's other, I know
Blue
there's like,
Sky.
yeah,
Blue Sky. Okay.
Blue Social, isn't that another one? I think that I have some friends that have gone over and they're like, you know, it's like what Instagram used to be like when it started. But I think if enough people go and it's something that the school does, it's almost like when Freddie was at BNS, oh no, I should say names, when my daughter was at school, they had a platform where we could get all the information, and it wasn't social media. It drove me crazy because we would have to go there, and it would have to be something like, it would be like a learning curve, but then people would just know that's where you go. And I guess if enough people do it, it will become something like Instagram. Or
There are also, yeah, different school platforms, Class Dojo, there's another one with a K, and just old fashioned email going,
yeah,
you know.
So school by school, the system doesn't have any larger responsibility to communicate to a widespread audience, except for like through the radio, for example.
Well, they had like Instagram and stuff like that, but we also had, there was also like a place where we would go and get information, and all the information was there. That was more of like we had this great whatever, you know, and there's like, they tell you about other things that are happening in the school, but it was like, it was in this other, all the real information lived somewhere else.
But I think, I do understand what Donald is saying, because I think that that's true at at the school level for lots of folks, but at the district level and at the city level, it feels much less accessible. And I don't know, I mean, it feels like there's kind of a chicken and egg problem where if NYCPS keeps posting on those channels, then families have to keep going to those channels to get that information, which then perpetuates the problem.
But
if they stop posting there, what replaces it is your question. I mean,
What are the more responsible platforms?
and are families there? Because if families are not there, hopefully, you know, there could be ways to drive engagement in those spaces over time. But in the meantime, folks who do depend on getting their information there, whether feedback there is received or not, I think is another question. But even like whether families are getting the information that they need, I think it's a fair question. I want to see them off of these platforms too, but
Is that really quality interaction with the system?
No, I don't think it's quality.
Well, I mean, does this, in all honesty, does this CEC have quality interaction with the system according to our own, like if we answer that with our own conscience? I think that like my answer would be like, we serve in an advisory capacity, and I don't actually think that we interact with the system, and we're in an ideal position to do so. But there is something to be said about people who can sort of like, you know, respond and say, hey, this is nonsensical. Why is this the decision of the system? You know, or whatever. I don't know. I thank you for honoring my concern, and I appreciate being able to share.
I wonder if there's like a way of like weighing like the lesser of the evils. Like X seems like such, like there's so much, I guess it's everywhere, but Twitter seemed like it was just like a melting pot for.
I mean, I think if we can.
Yeah.
I think it's been the shift in X and Twitter and Facebook of deregulating.
Section 230-ish.
Right.
Yeah.
And like if those platforms start to regulate more in terms of, you know, misinformation and hate speech and all those things, then it would become again a more responsible platform. So it's, I think,
And
to
should
me,
put the pressure on them to.
right, but
create a product that is.
I think at the heart of this demand is really about New York City public schools using responsible platforms that are meaningfully regulated to protect users and community members. And so if Meta owned, X owned, if they change their policies, revert back to more responsible, becoming more responsible platforms, I feel like that would be okay. It's more about not using the platforms that.
I think for me, it's like, would you be okay if the DOE were posting on the Playboy channel? Like, or some like really like offensive, like just like totally inappropriate channel, and because these platforms are just every channel, like you get.
The thought of kids stumbling on self-harm stuff while they're trying to look for information about the school, and like that kind of thing is just, it's so upsetting.
Yeah.
And it's the role of the large institutional users to shift our focus from these platforms to perhaps other platforms. I know that there are many folks who have moved out off of X, and I'm following them on Blue Sky, journalists, leaders, thought leaders. They're on Blue Sky now. It's a big move, it's not a small move. And Substack and like there are a lot of apps out there that I think the large users are the ones that have to refocus us. I don't think it's safe for kids and some families to be on those platforms.
Just a quick point as parliamentarian time, are we getting kicked out at 8:30?
Oh, Shanice, are we getting kicked out at 8:30?
At 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock,
Okay.
okay, but I think we should.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that
I
we
think, yeah,
had time.
but thank you.
I think that there's interesting arguments on both sides. Like I understand what Donalda is saying. There's something, but I also there's truth in both sides. Is basically what I think. Yeah,
I would like to move to both.
I'm sorry, I don't want to be overly dramatic. I'll keep it short. I just think there's vulnerability connected with, or that comes with being dependent on entities that have no sense of civic responsibility. And we see with Ukraine what the dependence on Starlink has brought them to. Obviously, this is not the same, but let's say there is a pandemic and the school is wholly reliant on X or Meta to get information to parents. And these organizations can't be counted on as good actors. That's a bad position to be in. That's an extreme example, of course.
But it's one we just experienced a few years ago.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a motion. Vanessa, did you second the motion? Okay. All right, I'll call them all.
Councilmember Antonia Ferrara.
Yes.
Councilmember Leslie King.
Yes.
Councilmember Vanessa Gonzalez Roca.
Yes.
Councilmember Nancy Cruz, yes. Councilmember Katina Rogers.
Oh, yes, with appreciation to Denalda for bringing up the question.
Councilmember Jonathan Davis.
Same thing Katina said, yes.
Councilmember Hans Arietta. And Councilmember Denalda Chung.
Abstain.
So with that, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It is approved.
Okay, thank you, guys. Let's move on to Coalition for Equitable Education Funding. We have Sarah Park. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I got thinking. Office of Food and Nutrition Services, Alexis Gillen.
That's the last resolution.
That's the last
Okay.
resolution. Sorry, I went a little brain dead.
It's all right, my computer's about to die.
And Ms. Tripodi, you wanna both come up here? Yeah, I guess I don't worry about it. I'm trying to. Okay, there we have it.
So thank you for having us. I'm Alexis Gillen and this is Alyssa Tripoli. I am the newly appointed District 15 supervisor and Alyssa is a newly appointed District 15 assistant supervisor.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. She has a very long history in District 15. I think you spent your entire career here, correct? And I have been around for a very long time. I was in Manhattan for a while. I was in 15. I went to headquarters, I went back to Manhattan, and now I'm back at 15. So I've kind of made my rounds around the DOE with off the food nutrition services. So I'm just going to give you a little overview of what we do, and then I'll give you a little specific what District 15 is up to and what we're doing in District 15 and what we can do for you. So again, we can go to the next slide. So overall, this is just kind of our school meal programs, the federal meal requirements. So some people don't understand why the students have to take what they have to take and what the reasoning is behind it. I definitely want to hear from you. And just our mission is to equally equitably serve New York City students with healthy and delicious meals that enhance their educational experience, reflect their voices, and nourish them into adulthood. So, you know, I'm a big you have to feed your stomach to make sure your mind is working, and that's what our students need. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so just a blanketed overall of the DOE, we have 26 different menus throughout the city, but they are consistent. So like a high school in Manhattan is serving if they're serving the same menu as a high school in Brooklyn, we're on the same menu. But we have from, you know, our different breakfast menus, which is a hot breakfast, traditional, a cold breakfast menu, which would be breakfast in the classroom or grab and go station. And then we have many different lunch menus. So it would be, we have a halal lunch menu, we have the CEC lunch menus, we have cold lunch menus, hot lunch menus. So there's different menus that we use throughout the city. We have 500 plus recipes which are sampled regularly. A ton of schools that we feed. I always like to say, if you think of the military and how many people you feed in the military, we are second to the military in the amount of students New York City Public School serve. So that's, if you put it in that percentage, it kind of is pretty big. The next slide. So we're student driven, and today was a perfect example. So we taste test frequently. So at PS, where we 295, we had a taste testing today of our new arugula pesto pasta. And it was great. We had set up a table in the cafeteria. We had little sampling cup. The kids come by, they taste it, they come back. They would put a ticket in, like we had a thumbs up bin and a thumbs down bin, and they taste it. And that feedback, I already emailed it in, gets directly sent to headquarters. We're doing another one of those tastings in PS1 on Thursday. But they also do taste testing up in Long Island City in our test kitchen. So it could be kind of like a field trip for the students. A class or a grade or a club will go up to Long Island City and they taste test new products before they're even put on the menu. So anything from a bagel that is not a recipe, it's just a bagel from a new vendor, or a muffin, or even like a recipe like today's recipe or different types of recipes. So, and they give more feedback than today's just thumbs up and thumbs down, more of like, this is too many sesame seeds, or I need more raisins in my cinnamon raisin bagel, or this is too peppery for like lemon pepper seasoning. So they really give good feedback. And I've been to a few of them, And they're fun. The kids enjoy them. It's a great environment for them. So, we always let the schools know that we are open to doing that. We bring them up to Long Island City. Our breakfast menu is, a great way for the kids to start their day. Like I said, we have breakfast in the classroom, we have grab and go, and then we have the hot traditional. We always have seasonal fruit. We use local dairy items, our whole grain, low fat, high fiber, and limited sugar items. We don't offer juice anymore, so no sugary items to start the day. It's all a good base for the students to start the day. And there's many different modules of the way the students can grab breakfast in different schools. Make sure they start their day healthy. So as I said, we have many different lunch menus. We are doing the meatless Mondays. So Mondays usually are typically pizza. We switched from the Friday pizza to now the Monday pizza for meatless. Or mozzarella sticks. We have our plant-powered Friday, which we just did a new recipe last Friday that was tested, and I was in a few of the schools and it really got great feedback. It was a new lentil pasta. So the students love that in the school that I was at. We don't have any processed deli meats. We have locally sourced products, so our Thursdays are usually typically locally sourced product. When I say locally, I mean New York State. So chicken that comes from New York State, our apples are from New York State, so Thursdays are typically our locally sourced. We have seasonally fresh fruit and vegetables. So just like we shop at home, you shop what's in season to what's not in season. It's fresher, it's a better price, it's a better product what's in season. So we do the same thing. Multiple menu items a day. So we always have a hot center of the plate item that the students can have. So like our pizza and mozzarella sticks. But there's always choices for the students that don't want that, of a peanut butter and jelly or a sun butter and jelly, a hummus, a cheese sandwich. So they have that other option if they're not into what the hot option, or if they just don't want a hot meal today. And on the menus, we have V for vegetarian and VE for vegan choices. So it's clearly stated on the menu so parents can help guide their students at home before they come to school, or teachers can help guide their students. 95% of our schools have salad bars. It was a huge initiative almost 20 years ago, and a lot of our schools have it. It's offered daily. It's an accompaniment to the meal. So for like Burger Day, we're putting on sliced tomatoes and lettuce. For pickles, for Taco Day, we're doing like a diced tomato, so it's almost like a pico de gallo, shredded lettuce. So we kind of make it an accompaniment to what the meal is. And the students can take, as much or as little as they want in the salad bar. There's no requirements of the salad bar. There's no real portion control on the salad bar. So the students are open to the salad bar. We have, again, on Plant Powered Friday, our Vegan Fridays, you want to call them. We have so many new recipes coming out. I just named one, the lentils. They're really great recipes. The students tend to enjoy them, but we also do offer those other options for the students that aren't into the beans and vegan options. So we do offer the peanut butter and jelly, the sun butter, the hummus, and a cheese sandwich on Fridays. So our nutritional standards, this is where some people don't, this is where we come into trouble, where people don't understand why we tell the kids what they need to take. So we follow the USDA, the National School Breakfast, the National School Lunch patterns. So they vary from K through 8 and then high school. So there are two different categories. So the portions change and the calories change. So all of our recipes, all of our meal components are based on K through 8 and high school. So, we might give peanut butter and jelly, might be smaller for elementary school, and then in high school we can do like a triple decker because we can add that extra bit of peanut butter for protein for the high school students that might need it. All the students have to take a fruit or a vegetable at lunch. So they don't have to take the meat alternate, they don't have to take a milk, but they need to walk away with 3 items, one being a fruit or vegetable. So I like to give the example, if it was a meal of like a chicken thigh, some rice, some beans, apples, milk were offered. If a student's just not into a chicken thigh and they want rice, beans, and an apple, that's okay. Because they're getting the proper portion of rice, they're getting the proper portion of beans, they're getting their apple, and then they can fill up on salad bar. They might just not be into some, especially our high school students, where they get in moods. I find where like, I'm not into this, I don't want this, I just want this, and that's okay, as long as they're taking that and they're walking away with fruit and or vegetable. We can go to the next slide. Again, this is just the breakdown of the portions and what we offer the students. We can go to the next slide. All right, so we do have halal menus. We have 3 halal, well, 2, but 3 buildings in District 15. We have 130, 130 Annex, and 131 are our halal buildings. It's very easy. People think it's more complicated than it is, but it is very easy for a school to become halal. They need to write out the principal. If it's a school with multiple principals, they need to write a email to the manager or directly to me. I filter it up. We come and do a site visit to make sure your school is ready for a halal inspection. So whether we have to add new equipment or we have to maybe scrub it a little more to get all the proteins out of some of the areas. And then we, and mom comes in, they check us out, they test us, they make sure that we're ready for halal service. And usually within 2 months, we can be up and running for halal. So it's really not a long process. And the menu really is similar to the regular menu. So the whole school becomes a halal menu, and then they have all the offerings that the regular menus have. So that's our halal. We do have meal accommodations with food allergies, milk options, and chocolate milk. So if a child has a food allergy, we can make a change right there on the line, we can accommodate them. So let's say a child is allergic to the breading on a chicken tender, and we're doing a salad with chicken tenders on top of it. We know that this child has that allergy. We're gonna make another salad and maybe do a scoop of tuna on top. And that's easy, we can do it on the line. Or if they have like a tomato allergy and it's a pasta day with tomato sauce or a chicken day with barbecue sauce, maybe we'll make it without the sauce on it and we'll give like some plain pasta with a different type of sauce, or maybe make chicken without the barbecue sauce. Those are easy accommodations that we can do on the line. When we have more difficult accommodations that maybe our kitchen can't handle or our manager can't handle, that's when we suggest that the student and the parents have a conversation with administration and the nurses. And then they usually get a doctor's note and a 504 is created. And then our nurses have a conversation with our registered dietitians. And there's a whole team created to make sure that each child is getting a specific menu and what they need to accommodate their allergies. So it's really, they'll then create a menu, our registered dietitians, based on those child allergies, and that's hung up in the kitchen. They come out and they train us, the kitchen, each kitchen, how many kitchens need to be trained, make sure the staff is there, and then we have a designated area if we need, designated utensils that are just for that child that we're just creating their meal for. So it's really, it's an easy process. It's something that is important that I find that some schools don't know enough about. So I really like to emphasize that it's easy to do. They just have to talk to the nurse, and the nurse gets in touch with, we need a letter from the doctor, and then we just have a meeting about it. And our registered dietitians, they're really, really on top of it, and they're really there to support the families and support the kitchens in making sure our students are getting what they need. We do have milk alternate options. So we have the soy milk, we have the lactose-free milk. That can just be asked for, and we can order those. We just need an email, and we can have those available for the students. That's not a problem at all. And then if some schools opt to not have chocolate milk, again, we can do that, but it's not a problem at all either. We can go to the next slide. So we do have cafeteria enhancement experience. So we have this in John Jay, 136, and Brooklyn High School of the Arts. So it's for the high schools, for the older students, for the junior highs, it's more of like a grab and go. They still get the hot options. They're still getting what's on the menu. They get a little bit extra options. So they'll have like chicken tenders as a second hot option for the day, where like a traditional service line doesn't have a second hot option. They only have one hot option. And the students can go up and kind of grab what they want. Instead of us serving them, we are behind the scenes sliding it into these merchandisers, and the students are then grabbing it. So again, it's for the older kids, and they feel, for lack of better words, cooler that they're doing it. They don't have to interact with someone. They don't have to say, no, I don't want this, can I have that? And then they can kind of take their meals and choose their meal. We're there to guide them, of course, but they're able to choose their meal as they want it. So they're slowly rolling out some more schools. So as we do, we'll get in touch with those buildings. And it's great. They come in and they do all the construction, and the machines are great, and they have an opening for it so that the students really enjoy it. They usually do over the cafeterias when we have these, and they put great artwork on the walls. The kids get booths, or they get high top tables. So again, it's more modern seating instead of a cafeteria table. Sometimes it's colorful to match the school colors, so it's nice. They personalize it to each school with the principal's one. So that's kind of it for our overall presentation. I just wanted to give you some stats that for District 15. So again, I spoke to the halal schools, I spoke to the CEA. So next year, we have building, PS 958 in Sunset Park. That is right now a satellite receiver. It's a newer building. We are going to be opening up that kitchen next year, so they'll be cooking food right on site. And the students will come down right to the cafeteria and eat it instead of having the food satellited over. So we're excited about that. We do serve Saturdays, after school, during the holidays. District 15 is busy all year round. So we're already gearing up to get ready for our service for during the spring recess. So we do serve regularly. At this moment, in District 15, so it's myself and Alyssa, we have 5 managers, and we have 4 cook managers, which is a new position that the DOE opened up for Office of Food and Nutrition. So it's a cook that now is, instead of having a manager in their school, they're cooking and they're managing their school. So PS 24, MS 88, PS 10, and PS 94. PS 94 have our new cook managers, and they're doing a phenomenal job. We had a tasting yesterday and today. Tomorrow is Plastic Free Day, which is great that District 15, PS 15 started plastic free for the entire city. So Plastic Free is tomorrow, and we have a few more dates during the school year that you can check on our website. And we are hiring. So they have hiring polls, there's posters in most of our schools for the hiring polls. It's on the website. I know it's on social media. But it is for right now. It's on social media. We do have an Instagram. But we are able at the district level to hire cooks and assistant cooks. So if someone has food service experience, if they worked at McDonald's, Starbucks, if they've been a line cook, if they were in catering, if they were in a hospital and they have food service experience and they want to come to the DOE, we have the ability to hire cooks and assistant cooks, which is great to get in on the ground level. But for the hourly positions, there's a hiring hall that they hold monthly out in Long Island City, and it's a great chance for people to get in and get started in food service. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you. So are there any questions from people joining us on Zoom? Gotta thank you for your work. Anybody on the Mandarin line?
No question for Mandarin line.
Anybody on the Spanish line?
No questions on Spanish line.
Any questions on the Bangla line?
No question in Bangla line.
Any questions or comments here in person?
One question, can you speak to budgeting at all? Because I know nutrition is one of the things that is tied up in the federal education money.
So our meal, I can't say it's the whole budgeting, but our meal plan, so for each meal that we serve, we are reimbursed. That's why it's so important that to count our meals, that each student takes a fruit or vegetable, because that's what's considered a reimbursable meal from the USDA. And so for every meal that's counted for that, we then can claim it, and that gets sent to the state, and then we get funding for that.
And that money comes from the USDA, not the.
Different, I like to, when I explain it, I just explain it from banks. So like our lunch money is from the National School Lunch Program, the USDA. Our breakfast is from the National Breakfast Program. Our snacks is from a different program, and our after school is from the CACFP. So it's different budgeting for different like programs.
What's CACFP?
Child. Yeah, child adults after program.
And are any of those tied to the Department of Education federally?
Excuse me?
Are any of those tied to the funding from the federal Department of Education?
Yes. Yes.
Do you know the portion?
Or no, I don't know the portions of that. Yeah, and our summer program also is tied to federal.
So if that DOE nutrition money went away, would that impact your operation?
Probably. Yeah, because right now, at the moment, everyone is free. So there's no more free, reduced, and paid. Like the lunch forms that were spoken about earlier, they really aren't lunch forms.
Yeah.
So they're for funding for the school. We don't look at them, we don't have anything to do with them, so that is school money allotted for. So I don't know if that was a problem, we would go back to free, reduced, and paid.
And then last question, who in the system would be able to speak to the proportion of the operating budget for your program being from the federal DOE?
Probably our finance department. Yeah, I can get in touch with, absolutely. I can send the CEC email that information tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Write that moment. If I don't write it, I forget it.
CEC questions, comments, ons? Nancy?
So thank you so much. This topic excites me always, so I really appreciate your being here. Food is so important, good nutrition is so important, especially when we have so many children who are a bit hungry in this country. I had a couple questions. So one of them was, I'm assuming you have to source your food from factory farms? Is that accurate, like the meat and?
So our meat is, we don't source it, like for the schools, it's sourced from Long Island City, we have vendors. And the vendors go through a lot of testing, we have higher standards than what like the Department of Health has. So yes, so we have higher standards than them, so it is sourced from factories and things, but they are, no GMOs, no, MSG, so they're as clean as we possibly can get them.
So no antibiotics, no.
Antibiotic-free chicken.
And that's possible from factory farms? I didn't think that was possible.
They're from, I don't know if they're from factory farms, but they're no GMOs, no, antibiotics, something like that.
Okay, and I know you mentioned that you can put tuna on something if somebody can't eat the breading on the chicken.
Right.
You mentioned a lot of options, but gluten-free is becoming a standard now, but I don't see. We know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm just wondering what the plan is for
Right,
providing.
absolutely, gluten-free is becoming more and more popular. At the moment, we do have gluten-free options, but that, if it is gluten-free, that's when, the combinations would come in handy.
So there's no plan.
They would be tailored specifically to the child, so that was, you would reach out to the manager, who would escalate it to Long Island City to the registered dietitian. They create an entire menu, they would share all of our recipes.
Right, no, I heard that already, but I guess I'm saying there's vegan, there's vegetarian, and.
Right, yeah,
gluten-free,
they
so I'm
haven't,
like,
no, they haven't done
There's
a
no
full
plan.
gluten-free, no, as of right now, there's no plan, it's individualized for the students.
Well, thank you so much for.
Antonia?
What's in the arugula pesto? Is there Parmesan or Reggiano?
So it's Parmesan,
These
it's
are the important
arugula.
questions.
Is there extra butter on
No. Chopped garlic and sunflower seeds instead of
Instead
noli
of
nuts.
pineapple.
Yes.
Okay, sunflowers, because kids aren't allergic to sunflower?
Less allergic, less.
If they are.
Yes, cannoli nuts are expensive, yeah. No, we tasted it today, it was delicious.
I'm curious.
Yeah, yeah, it's on the menu,
The
20th. No, yeah, we're tasting it at PS1, so I need PS1 parents.
Okay.
After you get.
I'm sorry, just one more question. When my kids were at 321, I know they had this enhanced lunch menu that had like roast chicken and all these beautiful things. There were separate menu, yeah, so what's that about? Because I was feeling a little some way about that. Because it was an affluent school and they were having these lovely lunches. And then at another school, they were having, the usual.
The alternative
beef
menu
patty,
actually.
not that there's anything wrong with
Right.
you know what I mean?
The alternative menu was discontinued, and right
Okay,
now
so
they're all
everyone-
pretty much, yes.
That's
That's.
thank you, that's very nice. Thank you.
Unless everybody can get the alternative menu.
Everyone's getting pesto
Yeah.
pasta on the 20th, and everyone's getting chicken with,
Yeah, eating is, the experience of eating is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I like what you're talking about, the furnishings and all of that, like making that, like, this is an educational experience also. And, are there knives and forks now as well, are there proper utensils?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not unless it's,
No, at
sometimes
321, they would get a roasted chicken, and as a
And a
parent volunteer, I had to cut it with a spoon.
Right.
Because after 9/11.
No, we have, forks and spoons.
But no knives.
Depending on the school and depending on asking, we have knives. But our chicken really, like, I eat the roasted chicken, and it's not
eating.
it's not a huge chicken breast that it was that you're talking about.
Right, no,
Now it's a
that's
small
not my
chicken.
point, that's beside the point. My point is just that it's an important part of.
It is, It's
But
not, we've
there's
gotten away from the
we're not-
sports. We've gotten away from the sports.
But we don't have proper utensils, knives and.
We have forks and spoons.
Thank you.
Vanessa?
Thank you so much.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
I was just gonna say, my son was part of a tasting at PS10, and I had the principal texting me in the middle of the day, to tell me that he had said the pasta was better than what he eats at home. Thanks a lot. And my daughter has been visiting middle schools, and I think MS88 has one of the.
Yes, they do have
enhanced
it. I
grades.
just gave it.
That was like top of her list, like that's why. she wants to go
MS88
to
is great.
school.
I
Yeah.
love that school. And that's our new cook manager, and what he's like one, I'm not gonna pick favorites, but he's phenomenal in the district. I love the work he does. I love his interaction with the students. He's not just behind the kitchen, he's out there. Yeah, he really knows his students, and the principal speaks very, very highly of him.
Thank you.
I was just, I love sports.
I mean, it's on the whole site, yeah.
Donaldo?
Thanks for all your hard work and sorry that you're the last people to go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Morning. I've always wanted to ask this question and never had the chance. Can you talk about which foods are nutritionally fortified and what that means for their caloric content and their, and the enriched kind of.
I will tell you, I am not your person for that. So to have our position, you're either culinary based, which is me, or nutritional based.
Okay.
I am a culinary based person,
Okay.
so I'm not the best person to speak on that, but we can have, if you want another meeting with our registered dietitians, we can have that and they can answer those questions. Or you can submit them to us in emails and we can have those questions answered.
It's just helpful to know because like when I worked in schools, I gained a lot of weight eating the, whatever. And then I came to understand that the federal government has some guidelines around, if a child gets one meal a day, it needs to be this number of calories and therefore foods are fortified to meet that level,
So
right?
our foods aren't fortified at any means, like we're not adding anything to them. They are counted, so like, a student is getting 3 chicken tenders. The big chicken tenders, they're getting 3 chicken tenders, they're getting, the half a cup of a vegetable to a cup, so they can choose that. So it is, there are certain caloric counts that they need to get and that we're not gonna go over. Again, the New York City Public Schools is meeting more of the demand than the rest of the country is.
Right, I
of our
totally
counts.
understand
Yeah.
that we're doing a great job with that. It's just that a lot of our kids approach the lunch line after they've already had meals from home.
Oh, my son's one of them.
And
Yes.
right, totally understand.
Yes.
And no shame in that game. It's just that parents don't realize that muffin has like 850 calories in it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's just helpful for the community to know.
Right.
That these
So-
foods are not your standard foods necessarily. Sometimes they're really, really powerful.
More of the breakfast, but like the grains.
Right,
That's
yeah,
like that.
it's all- it's
Where,
the
yes, where it's the breakfast, where breakfast, we have a lot of grains, where the lunch is not as much, because the lunch is more based on the fruit and the vegetable, and the grain is a smaller part of it, because we have more of it.
Okay, thank you
Yeah,
very much.
but I can have
Very
any of
clarifying.
those answers, and I totally agree, because again, I have one of those children who will eat his lunch.
I'm like,
and then he'll get a- Yeah, I mean, if he's eating it, they're running all day, he'll burn it off. He has calories to burn.
Yeah,
But-
for a lot.
Yeah, and he's constantly moving. But any of those questions, we can definitely either invite one of the registered dietitians here, or we can filter the emails to them to answer those questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's time.
Thank you.
We got it?
Yeah.
Is that everybody? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have to get out, but I do have to say we had a resignation, from a council. Dan Lee resigned effective today. She is a District 75 member. I will be notifying District 75 President's Council. They are the body that is supposed to appoint somebody. And so they take over that. So we do have 2 vacancies on this council. If anybody, wants to apply for the seat for the multilingual, learner parent, that seat is still open. And everybody, tomorrow night at 4 p.m. is the PBL showcase at MS 51, Project Based Learning Showcase. We also have a candidate forum, at 6 p.m. on Zoom. So, that's it.
And a Know Your Rights workshop coming
And
up.
the Know Your Rights workshop coming up on the 21st. Also one coming up very soon, 260, what school is it? 261 may be doing one as well. Yeah, I don't know. But, thank you all. I'm going to move to adjourn the meeting at, 8:53. Seconded by Katina. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and good night, and please, tune into the, candidate forum. Is that?